You too.
Good to be talking about something that's so important right now.
It is. So what is special about the concept of collective trauma now? Why is it relevant?
Well, I think we all realise we've gone through a year that's like no other. But many of us have taken this on as a sort of independent battle or an individual difficulty. But what isn't recognised so much is how much our society has changed during this time and the effects of that on us, because we're basically wired to connect with others. Neurobiologically, from evolution, we are wired to connect. And when the source of connection is deemed dangerous or a threat to us, we are sent into a tailspin because we don't know who to be or how to be in this world. And I think we're seeing the result of that right now with, a lot of bizarre behaviors of disconnect, the polarization we're seeing in society at the moment in very many spheres, but we're suddenly trying to create this island of safety on our own, and therefore anything outside of that is a threat to us, and that's increasing this separation on a collective level, and I think it's extremely dangerous.
You mentioned about the isolation, which was very much seems to be the point of some of the actions that have been taken, and not knowing who you can trust. And I suppose the effect of all of the questioning about the prescribed narrative means that people are they can't even trust those that they thought they could trust potentially. So in the healthcare system, in our government system, I'm sure that's adding to, okay, well, this is the school that I subscribed to first, so I'm sticking to it, whatever.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that.
Adds to the polarization.
Yeah. People who had a viewpoint at the beginning, that has been stretched hugely, but they're sticking to it because the threat of the unknown, of unpredictability, is greater than the doubt about the narrative. And so we're going down a route that feels familiar rather than safe, but we confuse familiarity with safety. And so we end up in a no man's land where we're not allowed to say anything. We're not allowed to critique anything, because the fear is we will be lost if we do, because we have to trust the people in power. Or do we?
Very good question. So a thought came to me then, and it's just completely gone straight out my head the other side.
That's what happens when you're in trauma. That's a trauma. It's a trauma. It's really funny.
It was about the isolation again.
Yeah. Well, it's not a new sensation for a lot of us.
Ah, yes, that was it. Why is it that we seem to go for familiar, even if we know it's unsafe to us? Why do we do that?
I'll tell you why, and that's because the part of our brain linked to survival, in our limbic brain, detects change as a threat. And the amygdala specifically, you've got two amygdalae, left and a right, but they're very wired to detect change, whether that's an internal change or an external change. And because it wants to pick up something that might be dangerous, it will err on the side of caution. And anything that deviates from what you neurobiologically expect becomes a threat. And hence, that's why a lot of people stay stuck, either in chronic illness or in bad marriages or abusive situations, is because it's familiar, and therefore the brain regards that as safe, even if it is completely dysfunctional. And so that's on an individual level. On a collective level, that's why we stick with the current setup that we've got, this capitalistic, all about me kind of consumerist culture that feels safe because it's predictable.
Yeah.
My new iPhone, not that I have an iPhone, but if I did, You know, will come out once a year and I'll have to upgrade.
Mm.
We don't question that because it's the new thing. That's what happens. Yeah. Or you could say, you know, the government, doesn't matter how incompetent they are, will get voted in again. Because what's the alternative? We don't trust the alternative. We don't even know what the alternative is. Democracy is actually undermined by that because we cannot make a critical decision because we're not weighing up all the options. We simply don't have all the information. We have what's going on now or nothing, which is deemed unsafe.
And quite often, actually, we're only told, well, this is what there is. And somebody might say, well, there is an option. What is it? Don't know yet.
It hasn't been tested.
Add to that. That was definitely a thing with Brexit that I was aware of. Nobody actually knew what Brexit, post-Brexit England would look like.
No, they were, yet in that case, the threat of staying in was greater than the threat of something new. And that, I believe, is because people's survival instincts had been already threatened by the EU in some ways, you know. The idea that we couldn't control our own destiny was a very strong emotive factor that triggers this same system, survival system. And survival systems are hardwired in pretty much, they're certainly wired in from an early age to teach us how to stay within certain parameters. And so it's the predictability of things that really matters. And most people had come to the conclusion that the EU had actually failed them in some way and they wanted to take back control. Indeed, that was the phrase, wasn't it? Take back control. The reality, of course, is that we've just got a new set of controls with an even less democratic process in some ways. I mean, I didn't want to go into... It
seemed that way.
Yeah, well, because of the government we have at the moment, you know, I think there's a lot of, well, how do I say it? Lack of scrutiny, I think, is the kindest thing I can say of processes.
I don't think anybody could argue that with what's coming through now either.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I guess my point more than that is what happens to us as a society is that we hunker down, a lot of us, instead of reaching out to each other, which is what we would normally do in a community. We would reach out for help if we're under threat. But then we're told that the other person, the person outside our household, is the threat. And so the very thing we seek to naturally do, our bodies want to do, which is connect, then becomes impossible. And so we've only really got one other system that can deal with that, and that's the freeze response. That's dissociation and numbing, which we're seeing, you know, in massive, you know, climate change. Yeah, well, that's not that important, is it?
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of, well, I'm going to be dead before anything changes. I don't care.
That's a disconnect from one's own body and from our place in the collective body. And I don't just mean in society, I mean as the earth. We are connected to the earth. We have the same atoms as the earth. We breathe the same atoms as trees give out. You know, we are linked. We are embedded in the system. We are a system, a biological system within a system. But when we cannot see our place in that system and all we do is numb ourselves with more purchases, you know, junk food, TV, social media, we are not connected at all to what's actually going on. And this is causing a huge destruction at an unprecedented scale.
I've heard people say that throughout the lockdowns, they were still in contact with everybody on telephone or as we are on Zoom.
Yeah.
What's the difference between this distant communication and connection as opposed to a physical face-to-face? Does that make a difference to how people are able to cope?
I think it does hugely, because although with face-to-face virtual connection, at least you've got facial expressions to go by, what's really important from a biological standpoint is being felt by another. to actually perceive that someone else gets you.
And that's not necessarily physical touch feeling, is it?
Not necessarily. It's an energetic exchange between one person and another, and their nervous systems. Don't forget the nervous system is wired electrically. So it has a electromagnetic field around that person, which interacts with another person's electromagnetic field, which resonates. We resonate with people who are on the same wavelength, or for whatever reason, love or care for us.
So this is the heart math type work.
It's pretty much what heart math have found out. I would extend even what they found out. They found out that the heart has its electromagnetic field, the torus, which extends up to 12 or 13 feet from the body.
And they've been able to measure that and evidence that, haven't they?
They absolutely have mapped it. And they've shown also that it resonates with the electromagnetic field of the earth. And that people, especially when they're in collective consciousness, they come together specifically for the purpose, can actually interact with the earth's magnetic field and be affected by it.
So that's things like meditation?
Intention doesn't have to be with your eyes closed and sat in a room with twiddly music. It can be actually sat in a room with other people. It happens at rock concerts. It happens in churches.
I can't wait to go back to those.
Me neither. You know, it happens at raves. It happens whenever people come together specifically for one purpose, which is kind of a shared purpose, because that in itself is a resonance. Because intention and thought is a vibration. And then when we're in connection with other people, we feel that. Yeah. It's not an intellectual process of thinking. It's a felt sense of connection, bonding, attunement, whatever you want to call it.
Feels good.
It feels great.
Yeah.
So look,
you can't necessarily say why it feels good. You're in the field with people thinking good thoughts, but it feels good. And that sense of community and belonging as well.
Belonging, feeling part of something bigger than you is a massive component to well-being.
And that's been denied through the lockdowns, hasn't it?
It's systematically denied. You know,
taking a little bit at a time to make so that you just accept, okay, it's only a little bit. It's only a little bit.
Yeah.
It's only a little bit.
You do your best. Everybody does their best. Yeah. But we've denied people, for seemingly good reason, the opportunity to comfort each other, to soothe each other, to be present for each other. And we've, in the place of that, we've said, well, yeah, we can do all these Zoom calls, but I'm not in the room with you. I'm not sharing space with you. I can read your body language, and I can tell you're kind towards me and whatever. You're not looking angry or aggressive.
Because you're fabulous and we're great mates.
But being in the room with you is a different experience altogether.
Very much so, yeah.
It totally is. And, you know,
now we giggle a lot.
We do laugh a lot. And that is because we enjoy this resonance.
Interestingly, my son, who is very definitely, he's a very modern young man, he finds non-in-person communication really unpleasant and really stressful. And he would rather not have dialogue with somebody unless it's in person than have to go through a Zoom call or a text, or a phone call is his worst. And it's fascinating to watch. So this is somebody that has grown up with modern technology. I mean, he had his first mobile phone when he was 12 years old and started senior school or whatever. And he finds it really difficult. And I know he's not the only person.
No, I think the more sensitive you are as an individual to your environment, which is a huge component of why some people are hugely affected and others are not, or seemingly not. Their nervous systems do react, but they're not aware of them. The more sensitive you are, the more likely to notice that difference and to react to it and want to avoid those kinds of interactions that don't meet your needs, your neurobiological needs for connection. Because make no mistake about it, when you biologically connect to someone, when you resonate with them, their nervous system connects to yours energetically. That's why it's really important to be around people who get you.
Yeah.
And you don't get to choose that often in families. You get what you get.
Mm-hmm.
But to have someone who is there for you no matter what, which hopefully you have in your friendships, if you don't have it in your family. Some people are lucky and have it both ways. But your son, I would imagine, is someone who does notice the difference. All right. And someone on the phone, he isn't able to pick up the cues as well as he would in person. In fact, you're divorced from seeing them. And so these things are really important. And I think technology is fabulous. I mean, it enables us to do things we could never imagine. I was thinking about that the other day. I was thinking, I have a little computer now with me, that I carry around. I call it my mobile phone, but it's a computer, really. It does everything I need it to do.
More computing power than we used to get man on the moon. So.
That's right. Exactly. So, that's wonderful. I think it enables us to interact with our world in ways that we never would have dreamed of. But we have to be aware that we're also sacrificing a great deal of purpose and motivation to do something to heal our world, because this numbing and dissociation has become so common that we can barely even cope with the idea that we've got 30 or 40 years to save this earth.
Yeah.
I mean, most people are like,
Bush says 6 or 7 more harvests at the most.
Yep.
Which, when you put it into single numbers, makes it feel even less time, because it is no time at all.
So things like Brexit are going to become completely immaterial.
Yeah, totally irrelevant. So at the moment, we've got some problems that we can see in society, perhaps we believe, you and I believe, because of this collective trauma. But how is this going to manifest? I mean, are people going to recover and just pick themselves up once this is over? Or do you think further things are going to develop, further problems? Or
I think we're seeing already things are moving on from that initial first wave where we were all in complete stunned, passivity. And where the panic buying was such a prevalent thing, wasn't it? People wanting to stock up and save themselves. And
isn't that the need to take action as well? So it's actually a really healthy thing to do.
It is. But
apart
of course,
from for anybody else who wanted toilet roll.
It's a selfish, action that does have long-term effects for other people, of course. I think we're moving into a new phase where we're thinking, what can we now do to move ourselves beyond where we've been? Because I think a lot of us have recognized that we've been doing jobs we didn't like. We've been in relationships where the only way we could cope with them was by working such long hours, and then suddenly we're forced to be with those people all day, every day, and we're thinking, maybe not. We've had to reevaluate the relationships with our children from homeschooling and so on. But we're going into a new phase now where I think we need to look wider and bigger to who are we as a collective, as communities. That's where I'd start, building communities, whether that's a community in your local area or a community online. It's about making connection with other people and losing this polarity, us versus them. You're a pro this and I'm an anti that. And that somehow that makes us enemies. I think that's what I want to embody, that kind of polarization. I want to understand that we're all driven by the same human needs for, meaning, purpose, connection, novelty, variety, safety. We all want these things.
And I was thinking safety, and we find safety in different ways.
We find safety in different ways.
All okay.
Yeah. And coming into awareness that we're all different, and that each of us regards things that the other person would think, in a bad light, you might think is brilliant. But that doesn't mean we can't empathize with the other person who's having that feeling and thought. And I think building bridges is where we need to be here, and seeing that there are some things that override all of what has gone before. And I think this climate crisis, call it what you will, is that thing. We either have to pull together now, or we all fall apart.
Yeah.
This notion that, you know, the rich will survive. Well, you can't eat money.
No.
Never, ever. If the soil is gone, the soil is gone. Unless maybe you colonize Mars, perhaps that's another option. But not yet. Technology's not there yet to be able to breathe that air. So, you know, I think we have to get our act together in some way or another to learn to love each other, even if we disagree.
Beg to differ, but still love you.
Yeah, which is, you know, it takes some doing, though, doesn't it?
It's a very rare statement. It's one that my mother and I have grown up with, because we are such different people. And you ask us any question and we will give you, I'll give one answer and she'll be on the opposite end, and we just look at each other and say, love you. We don't try and convince each other.
No.
We beg to differ and love each other but I would say there's so little of that going around at the moment, which is, as you say, clearly something we need to work on.
That's a collective trauma, definitely, you know.
Is there anything else that we can do you think, to help mitigate, negate, transmute this collective trauma?
Well, I think we have to heal our individual traumas, because I think the bigger picture is coming from each of us resonating in ways that are unhealed, dissonant, easily triggered. You know, the anxiety epidemic at the moment, which is absolutely stratospheric.
Unbelievable. 5% of children are diagnosed with severe anxiety. There's a statistic to worry about.
Exactly. So
that's the diagnosed ones.
Yes. So let's say at a conservative estimate, 30 to 40% of children are suffering from anxiety, probably more. Growing up into adults who don't know how to regulate themselves neurobiologically, who don't know how to balance their nervous systems, who overreact to things and then teach their children to do the same. So where we're at right now requires a huge amount of self-compassion, but it also requires an understanding of the tools and techniques that are available to us uniquely at this time to heal ourselves. It has to be said with other people, not individually. In relation to others, whether that's friends, communities, families, therapy, you know, undergoing therapy, which is, you know, obviously I'm going to say that, aren't I? But it's such an important component of healing.
It is. You sometimes you need somebody who actually understands what on earth is going on with you, because when you're in it, you can't see it.
Well, I explained it to someone this morning, a young woman, very nervous, who has just been given pills, you know, that's all. And she told me what had happened to her. And I said, has anyone ever asked you that medically? What happened to you? No. They're not interested in what went before. They're only interested in what symptoms you're presenting with. And we are not divorced from our environments. As human beings, we are interacting with our environments. And if our environment taught us certain things, that, you know, the people that were supposed to love us are unsafe, where is there to turn? And our bodies will react accordingly. But when you give people information about what's happening, you take away the fear that what is happening is some random, unexplainable, incurable disease.
It normalizes it, makes it
understandable,
acceptable. Yeah. And then it's not so scary. And then you can look at it and then you can sort it. Yeah.
And you can heal it. You can heal it once you get out of the fear loop that says this is going to overwhelm me. This is too much. I can't handle it. Oh my God, there's that symptom again. Because you start to get hyper aroused and hyper aware, and that's the anxiety loop.
And my main focus in my practice is not officially trauma. It's mainly body work and coaching, but it is so absolutely trauma. I'm discovering this more and more every time I see another client. And one of my first questions is, okay, what was happening in your life when you first experienced this back pain or your shoulder went? Because quite often it's not an injury at all. There's nothing that they didn't pick up a box. I mean, they might be pick up a box of tissues and their back went.
Yeah.
And they are always shocked. Well, why do you want to know that? Okay, well, when you first had it, eventually we have the conversation. This was kind of going on in your life. Now you've come back with a flare up. What's going on in your life? And you could see the penny drop. This is not necessarily a physical cause. This is a mental cause or a social cause or an emotional cause. Why is it physical? And then explaining to people, the body doesn't understand any difference between spiritual pain, physical pain, psychological pain, surgical pain, accidental pain. It's just pain, and the neurons fire in exactly the same way. And so your body is just really simple, and it's just trying to tell you stuff. But it's amazing that people say, well, nobody's ever asked me that. And quite often you end up with your clients crying just because they are suddenly seen and recognized.
They are seen and felt by you. And we could stop right there and do nothing more for them, and we would have helped them. But we also choose to intervene in certain ways that rebalance their bodies or their minds or both, hopefully. But it's, you know, emotions are there to guide you. They're there as a sort of interface, if you like, between you and your world. They teach us what it is we need to do. But so many of us are not trained how to interact with our emotions, how to process them. You know, virtually every fibromyalgia person I've ever come across has buried anger, you know, rage even against someone in their life. And that inability to process is because the parents themselves are traumatized and weren't taught. And thus
the education system,
well,
anger is so unacceptable. You've got to sit, you've got to be still, you've got to be silent.
In fact, you've got to be isolated.
Yes.
You've got to be taken away from the very thing that would help soothe you, which is a neurobiologically safe person, somebody that feels you. And no, you're shut in away in a corner or in another room, and you're told to go away and think about it. You don't need to think anymore.
And the famous Dr. Spock on parenting, which is my mother's generation, very much so. Your child is there to ruin your life. You must train it. Do not respond to its crying. And we wonder why we've got a generation of traumatized people. We never, a baby's connection is very much a physical thing, isn't it? They need the physical touch. They don't just need their needs met. No. Because you can meet all of the skincare, dietary and basic care needs of a baby, but if you don't touch and hold, that baby will, they call it in hospital, fail to thrive. It means die. Yeah, basically. And it happened a lot. It's happening a lot less now because we've got smart to it. And babies are, you actually have people going into intensive care baby units who just are, they go in and all they do is hold. They're not nursing staff, they're just volunteers, and their role is to hold the babies for a couple of hours every day. Beautiful. And it's changed the prognosis of these babies that need incubator care and need intensive care. They're now surviving. And hopefully we'll keep working on this and then they will thrive. Well,
those first few weeks and months are so crucial in terms of how the baby's brain correlates safety versus threat. I mean, I've talked a lot about this in other videos, but just the holding allows the baby to be aware that it can be safe in its emotions, that it can be sad or angry or need its nappy changing or whatever, but the feeling is supported. And then the baby's brain learns that its feelings are supported, and it can grow up into a child that is able to express emotion. So we've seen a lot of trauma from separation, from, as you've described, just letting a baby cry itself to sleep. You know, we are wired to connect. And when we understand that, and when we love ourselves enough to work on ourselves to the point where we feel ourselves, we are good people to be around. And thus we help heal others just by our very presence, and not by what we do, but who we are. That's what makes the difference with good parenting, you know, good schooling, which we don't see, you know, great people teachers, but they're not trained in trauma, and they're not trained to really observe the behavior as a symptom of the underlying issues.
In England and Wales, but they are in Scotland, aren't they?
Yeah, Scotland are getting better.
ACE aware.
They're getting more ACE aware. That's brilliant. We're lagging behind a little bit. There are a few countries in the world that are really taking this on. America is doing pretty well now. But we have seen, you know, the vast number of people in prison have had more than 6 ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, where they were left to fend for themselves as children, because it's not, as I say, it's not what happens to you, it's being alone in what happens to you, it's having no one to turn to. And so that is what we need to do, is support each other in ways.
And that's what we've been taken through. We have been isolated through this pandemic since March 2020. We've been put on our own with invisible risk, where our trusted, loved others, family members are now a potential threat.
Yep.
We're seeing that coming out in the anxiety and the numbing behaviors of alcohol is the one that I see a lot of.
Alcohol, overeating.
Yeah, and most people I know have either become addicted to exercise and are now so buff you don't recognize them, or have gone for numbing with alcohol and food and have gained a little extra weight in the wrong places.
There's a lot of that.
That's knocking on to the polarization, which further divides and fractures our world, really, doesn't it? This polarization.
It's deeply divisive.
The polarization between the people who choose to vaccinate and those who are hesitant or questioning, and the people who absolutely refuse. But we've also got that in gender identification. It's very polarizing at the moment. In race, we've got big problems of this polarization. And so the way to get through these, you're saying, is very much about connecting together again. Well, finding community group tribes somehow, whether that's in person or with like-minded people on the internet.
Yeah.
But you're saying that we need more face-to-face, so not just texting on Facebook groups.
I think we need more touch.
Yeah.
More hugs.
I'm a massage therapist. I'm with you on that.
Exactly.
And it's like you, yeah.
But at the very least, we need more connection with others, to cooperate, to collaborate, to sing. I don't just mean literally, I mean to kind of work out what gives us joy and to do more of that. Because when we are in joy, we cannot destroy our world, because we're in harmony with ourselves, with our bodies, with our needs. You cannot destroy your own nest if you're in harmony with it. But here we are disconnected. And I just want to, call to arms is get connected in some way.
Yeah, actually singing and dancing and drumming, again, together, but not necessarily in person, is some of the most effective, readily available ways to help you transmute trauma. Yes. And that sense of community and that rhythm, which supports your biorhythm and that calmness. So yeah, singing actually practically as well as
is a good
having that
thing.
Joy and song in your heart.
Definitely. We know this. We do know this. We've just forgotten. But we've been encouraged to forget. So
yes.
So that's kind of my view, and thank you for allowing me to express that.
Oh, thank you for sharing some really, really good points.
Okay.
And so much hope that it is recoverable, and we can actually pretty easily start to build community again. We just need the courage to make that first contact.
Yeah, and I think we're doing that. We are, some of us are doing it more than others, but you know, it only takes a few to light the fire. I want us to be doing that, lighting that touch paper, getting people connected again, getting people healing and resonating, and maybe we can do the things we're here to do as human beings, not just survive, but to thrive.
To thrive all. Patricia, thank you very much indeed for your time, as always. Absolute pleasure. We could talk for hours.
We usually do. No, you're welcome. You're very welcome. And so if anybody wants to contact us, they can. We're on, where are we? They can find me on alchemytherapies.co.uk. I'm also patriciawarby.com, WORBY. And we together are fatiguefree.me. That's fatigue-free.me.
And the Greenwood Holistic Health Group, which is is it? Okay, let's stick to the fatigue-free me. I can't remember whether we've got hyphens or not. For me, I'm Greenwood Therapies. That's greenwood-therapies.com.
Yeah, people can find us through Fatigue-Free Me. It's just a lot easier than trying to remember hyphens or no hyphens. So we're looking forward now to seeing people. We've begun this very important team collaboration work, which is something we're very excited about. And it absolutely chimes, doesn't it, with what we've just been discussing. So between us, we are more than one.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Bye.